Hi, everybody. I'm Tina Brock, producing artistic director of the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium, and you have joined us for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation where every Saturday at 5 p.m. we're going to belly up to the table and bring good nothingness to life with some of our favorite guests and creators and artists and just people who are out in the community right now making sense of the crazy existential times that we live in. So much opportunity and so much challenge for us right now. And while we cannot be on this stage with you in 2020, what we can do is have a dinner conversation with some of our favorite people, introduce them to you as an audience, and illuminate the great work and thinking that is happening not only in this community, but around the country. So we want you to join in the conversation and put your questions in the chat box for us today, and make sure that you're on our mailing list, and we will send you an email each week letting you know who is coming to the dinner table. And as well, you can find us on Facebook Live, and we will be uploading all of our episodes to the IRC's YouTube page. On today's show, Heather Cole. She is a producer, she is a performer, she is an all-around amazing woman that I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of, I don't know how many years ago now, quite a few probably, maybe 10 years ago at this point, when she was in Witold Gombrowicz's Ivona, Princess of Burgundia, and she played that title role so beautifully. And she's also been in a number of other productions, Bernard Shaw's Miss Alliance. And I recently caught up with her because she has a YouTube show called Crafting with Connie. And with her partner, Steve, she is she is one of the proprietors of Without Feathers Films. And so I want to welcome today to the IRC dinner table the lovely Heather Cole.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Heather. Welcome to Into the Absurd. It's so good to see you again. And you are today not in New York. You are in New York normally, right?
Yes.
Temple grad, and you did some work with Headlong and Upright Citizens Brigade. And I got to know you from here in Philadelphia, working in dance. And you're here in Philly, but getting ready to go back to New York. Is that right?
Yes. It was my parents mostly wanting us to escape New York during the peak, just for, I guess, peace of mind. So we kind of packed up everything, packed up some of our film equipment, and have been staying at my future brother-in-law's place. But yeah, we're going back to New York on Tuesday.
Well, I want to dig into Crafting with Connie, which is Heather's hilarious YouTube program. And for those who are more my age, the thought that kept going through my mind was sort of a Vicki Lawrence from the Carol Burnett show. If you sort of took Vicki Lawrence and sort of a mashup of that in Pee-wee's Playhouse, and then sort of asked Wes Anderson to get involved in that somehow, those are the thoughts that were going through my mind. So, and for those of you who have not seen it, you must go to YouTube and Crafting with Connie, and it is basically Connie helping us understand how to be crafty during difficult times. Is that fair to say,
Yeah.
Heather?
It started about, I'm actually celebrating my 6-year anniversary in New York. And we started her, I want to say about 4 years ago. I was hand modeling and getting a career as a hand model. And, at that point, it was all those tasty videos that they were trying to show recipes. And I'm a terrible cook. So the idea was like, what if this Betty Crocker, like Susie, like homemaker was doing stuff, but like we finally see the character who is showing you these videos. So we did shoot like a parody video of jalapeno cornbread where I chop off my finger in the recipe making. But then it slowly turned into this Connie character. So the first season actually took like 3 years to make all those videos. Like we really weren't doing it consistently just because timing, like work, other things coming up. and then I got a little discouraged because there's that show with what's her name? And I love her too. She was on Strangers with Candy. She has, it's like at home. Oh, Amy Sedaris, At Home with
Oh,
Amy Sedaris. So I actually worked on her show, her pilot episodes like season, and I stepped onto her set and was like, oh my God, this is Connie. Like I was doing this first, and got down in the dumps because it was like, I don't have the budget or, to make this creative set and all these characters. But then once quarantine hit, it was like, we have Connie. It's just only me and Steve really needed for a safe set and to be able to do something, at least make some sort of content during this COVID quarantine. So we're like, let's write more of a narrative base versus so centered on the craft and the joke of the craft. So that's kind of how the series developed into more narrative and more storytelling, which actually has been great for dealing with every absurdity that's going on right now, and it's the contradictions, and it's like, well, you said the air is going to kill me, like how am I supposed to go outside to just like, I haven't seen a human being, let me kidnap a person. And we've cranked out 11 episodes in this series, and it's great to say like, hey, I produced a web series for 11 episodes with a 2-person team that was COVID safe, which I think a lot of creators and makers are going to have to figure out how to have a safe set or a safe studio atmosphere just to provide for their actors and crew.
So I went back and watched, was the first episode in 2016, the Thanksgiving episode, and then you followed with the Christmas episode, and the Thanksgiving one seemed to be sort of just like introducing us to Connie and then as sequence came on, as you said, more narrative started to come in and more plot development and whatnot. I noticed in the first episode, her voice was a lot lower, right? Is that right? And then as the episodes went on, it got to this, so tell me about the progression of that. Is it just working through her?
It's working through it. It's definitely finding the clown of her. It's also hard just because I wasn't doing her so consistently. So like finding her voice and finding her body, her shape. That, I guess, finding her, realizing who she is, the more I do her too, the more I can find her little idiosyncrasies and be like, oh yeah, of course she would say that, or maybe she would do this weird laugh, and then trying to keep those consistent then in the other episodes.
The COVID episode, or the episodes, at least the last couple that I've seen, seem to be it seemed what jumped out at me from those episodes was it always looks like she's smelling something bad or something with facial gesture, and also the fact that she doesn't open her eyes very often. So tell us about that. It's just this just grew out of your work. Are you often delivering the lines with your eyes closed? It looks like your eyes are closed most of the time.
So it's so Steve will be directing me from behind the camera, and he'll be like doing this, and of course my eyes are closed, and like I have no idea that he's gesturing to me to like look that way, or maybe to do something like a gesture, because I'm total Mr. Magoo with this character. And it's I've been trying to figure out then, like, where's the comedy, like almost like a Muppet of like, when do I open my eyes and to express. But the character not being able to see has been fun in exploring that, like Mr. Magoo, Amelia Bedelia, these childhood characters we grew up with, and then just putting them into a form. I do want to tell you a silly story with Connie. When you send out your headshot and resume, like usually I'll include in my email of like, oh, I do this episode just so you can see some of my comedic content that I write and produce as well. And I've had not just once, but a few times people have been like, oh, like we want to hire you, but, I think you're a little too old for the character. And I'm like, too old. And then the one time they're like, we were going to go with my wife, but she's too young. And I was like, well, how old's your wife? they're like, oh, she's like 34. And at that time I was like 27, and I'm like, who, what? And they're like, oh, we watched your crafting video and we think you'd be a great for the part. And I was like, it's a wig, and it's clearly like, I sent you my headshot, but like, people have been trying to hire Connie, which I just, it's good. It's also like, I'm like, do I look that old? But it's been fun just like tricking people in making Connie feel realistic, that she does exist.
Yeah, well, I think that's the ultimate, right? The ultimate goal is that they buy you as that character and they want you into, I mean, I think you do look very young under the wig, but I
Yeah.
guess it's a really great thing that, that they're responding to that character. Who comes up with the crafts, and tell me about the decisions on the crafts, because I have a lot of questions about
Yeah.
that.
So the Cronuts episode, that was, I actually performed that live. I had an audition to get on one of the teams at the Pit, which is just another like sketch, like a UCB in New York. And they wanted us to perform like a last minute monologue character made up on the spot. So that's kind of how I figured out Cronuts. But the quarantine crafts, I literally, like, I'd go on Pinterest, and I know like toilet paper was like a really big thing in this quarantine. So I looked up toilet paper crafts. And of course, Steve's mom, I do draw a lot from my own experiences, and both my mom and his mom love to craft. And she was saying, oh yeah, you can make a toilet paper reef. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, that also sounds really dumb. Let's do it. And then like, I would look it up on Pinterest, and people have done pretty much all the crafts that Connie has made, except they do them a lot better. The idea is, Connie just kind of does a semi version, like it's not so thought out. It doesn't really matter about the craft, because she's trying to teach you something about like survival or something else that's really going on.
Yeah, I thought the tea bags and the glitter was a favorite, a favorite one. And I also really liked the episode where the pizza delivery guy shows up and you hijack him, and then hilariously his face is like sketched out, and you keep him hostage in the basement while you do the tic-tac-toe box. Is that
Yes.
right? The
Yeah.
tic-tac-toe game.
Which is the craft. It does exist. But again, it's finding like, to go drive the narrative more. Then was just figuring out, it's like, okay, like Connie hasn't had an interaction for a while. What could she do a craft with a friend? Versus like, also like, what do we have around the house? And it's like, oh, a pizza box.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Like, let's figure out that craft. So it's been a lot of, especially being a low budget indie production company too. It's like, we don't have the ability to like go out and buy a bunch of props. So it was like legit going to the dollar store and being like, okay, this is what's at the dollar store. Like, let's see what we can figure out this way. Or we have this seltzer bottle, like what can we do with that? And finding the jokes and of like what would be more visually appealing. Making Canny. I love Canny. I'm very excited. Like we've already talked about, we'll bring him back for the next season.
You've got it's Canny, and then isn't there a cleaner guy?
Yeah, Palm Olive.
Right?
We have Moldy, which is from the planning episode with my sunflower seeds. It literally was getting mold on it, so we just were like, well, this stays. This is gross and hilarious, and I don't want to touch it, so it's going to just live here.
Well, speaking of gross and hilarious, but one that was really fun is the episode where you decide to, and this might have been at the holidays, the one where you decide to use all natural ingredients to do your makeup,
Mm-hmm.
and end up smashing blueberries and strawberries and things all over your face to get the organic part going. Tell me about, do you write the episode going into it? Do you sort of sketch it out and then improv it? How much is planned? Do you rehearse it? What are the production sort of elements of it?
So it's some of it's sketched, like a loose sketch out of like, okay, these are the beats that need to happen in order to do the storytelling. almost like a commedia dell'arte idea of like, we know the stock character, we know what they're they might say or how they're going to react, but we need to at least hit these beats. So my intro and my outro usually always kind of stay the same word wise. I usually get a few takes of those just to like go through my language. Um, Once in a while, I'll jot down like a joke or two that I'm like, oh, this might be funny if I mention this. But other than that, like, they're 18 long minute takes of like, Steve has so much footage to go through in the edit, and he's great with he really makes it come to life and really brings out the funny, with just like the editing that he's been doing. So yeah, it's a lot of improv, and I am super grateful for him sitting through all that footage.
But that's a great, it's sort of like being on a tight wire. It's like being live on stage, right? I mean, you're doing 18-minute takes, so they have to go that long, and then you just commit to going in and rather than stopping and starting and just figuring out which bits and where he can cut away to the most interesting. Now, jumping back for a second to your pizza delivery guy, was that Steve?
Yeah, that's Steve.
I was howling with the skewed out face and him like maneuvering in the chair while you're creating the pizza box and then trying to play tic-tac-toe with him. It was really inspired and very fun.
Yeah.
So how much of your scripting do you it seems that it has gotten, well, obviously because we have COVID and you're down in the basement, and there's hints of just, I felt really sad for Connie in a number of places where, you know, I think we're all struggling with what's the contribution I can make in my basement in a safe space that will keep me sane, that will also keep me. I felt like there was a real public service announcement there. Do you guys? Does that come into the conversation when you are making, the scripts, or do you just kind of take it that way when you're in that 18-minute block?
I've been trying to kind of curve her into a more Mr. Rogers character from the get-go. Just even in my earlier that Thanksgiving episode, um, creativity is an important thing, and I've always felt that way. I actually have an art minor. Um, so I do paint and draw in real life, and I do love to craft. I've actually been making a bunch of shag rugs during quarantine in like my real life. So I've actually been doing a lot of crafting, but
Like the
finding,
hook rug, like
yeah, those hook
hooking
rugs,
with my friends
I've
to do
cranked
that.
out like 10 of them. I can't wait to not do anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but that struggle of like, when you are a creative person and you really don't always have the words to say, and it's like you express yourself more, and that's, I guess, the dancer in me too, is like, I don't really know how to say it, but I can express it, and that goes into any form of art. And I think that's important to just remind people that, like, even if it's a silly craft that's a bird feeder that's made out of bird seeds, and you're going to hang it up on, outside, like, it's still, you're creating, you're doing something, you're using your imagination, and it's still important. Even if you're not writing the next Shakespeare, you're still creating something, and that's good, and you should feel that warmth and reward from doing that.
One thing I noticed in, it's a fairly tight shot of you right at the table. I'm thinking mostly of the ones when you're in the basement and doing the crafts and and it did remind me of how fluidly and specifically you move on stage in the sort of creating of your crafts. The way that you used your hands and your fingers and everything was very specific. And I felt like it brought this elegance and this other storyline to what you were doing that I found really fascinating. So it was just, I feel like it's a multi-layered experience that we're getting, sort of times of where we're all kind of like, wouldn't we all, and haven't we all just hunkered down, during that time. Now, do you have plans? Are you guys going to continue during this time to do once a week? Is that how it will roll out?
So the political climate has kind of hampered our release dates. We do have 3 more episodes to release in this series. We we have other plans. So Connie will leave the basement by the last episode. We're trying to get her up and out into the world, but I don't want to give away too much, but we do have her next adventure, and feeling essential is
Mhm.
the best, without giving too much away, is how does Connie find being essential again in this new normal, is kind of how we're leaving this series off at. And then the idea is to have like a few week hiatus at like a real, series would take anyway, and then going back in hopefully when more things are open. Um, as Steve and I have a few other projects. We have a whole Civil War series we're working on right now too, that we're like, maybe put Connie to rest so we can think of more ideas, and then work on this other thing, and then come back to Connie when hopefully the idea is to do some more interviews with other people, um, kind of take her more out into the world and with other people, interacting with other people
Mhm.
where it's safe. So we kind of need to go on a hiatus to have the
Or
world
effect.
kind of get
Mhm.
back to whatever it was or whatever it will be, just kind of feeling that out before we film the rest of the series. But yeah, there's 3 more episodes left for this series, and then yeah, she's gonna come back again. We
She's
have
gonna have
a
will we ever see her family, or will we see just her it's more her venturing out into the world and how
it's gonna
she
be her venturing out into the world. We will meet Paul at some point. Um, there was talk, we do have this like old man puppet that we built that we're like, maybe this is Paul, we don't know. um and then once we kind of, like, Steve is now out, since we've like used his face technically as the pizza man, so it's like
Mhm.
hoping to hire maybe an older actor to play Paul, but we'll probably meet Paul at some point. I know Connie will be coming back. It's so funny, like talking to other people, and they're like doing Connie's voice and talking about all the other characters, and I'm like, oh, you guys are like actually paying attention, and it's not just like me going insane in a basement talking to a can puppet, um, which is,
Yeah, no,
it
I mean,
feels
I
good.
think
It's good.
there's real richness in there that I think is resonant. I felt that way in watching it, with just, the struggles that we're all facing and what is the craft that we can all take up that it will, as you say, channel your creativity. Um, the Civil War project, uh, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Is this,
It's a little bit more of Steve's brainchild, but the idea of it is kind of more like a steampunk, um, almost like superhero Avengers take of the Civil War. There are a lot of stories and like just that really are not really told in, they're not like, big stories to tell of our history of the Civil War and dealing with it, and it's kind of dealing with more thriller, horror, um puppets. There's we love puppets. um but it's something we actually were planning on shooting last fall. We were starting to interview a few, like try to location scout around Pennsylvania, especially like Bucks County. But then, the snow, it comes. It's like if you don't get your location right away, then you can't really act on it. And always budgeting, money is always like, how do I do
Mhm.
this and do it for a way we can afford it. Um,
Are you
but
guys
yeah, but
getting
now we
ready?
have time. We have all the time in the world. So there's no excuse. It's like, let's try to make something, even if it's just one episode, um, just to show that we can do this. It's something we're capable of making. And hopefully we get the support that we can keep making more, which,
Are you able to apply for grants for it, or how do you fund it?
um, yeah, it's always a crazy thing to think about. We've tried to reach out for grants. Um, More so, it's like doing those crowdfunding, Indiegogo type
Mhm.
videos, which a lot of those you need a proof of concept, or one episode. It's always that first episode that hopefully you'll get more funding from.
Mhm.
Honestly, I was hoping for this wedding that we were supposed to have this year to have that fund our web series, but now it's looking like maybe next year that will go to something else. But yeah, it both Steve and I, for working on in the indie world, have learned how to really crunch down those numbers. And you can work with an intimate team and only have maybe 3 or 4 person crew, and if everyone does their due diligence, like in the theater world, which I mean, lived in for so long, a lot of people wore multiple hats. It wasn't just, well, you hire your one person and they only do that job, and then they're going to sit there and watch everyone else struggle. Where with theater, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I see that I need your help over here. Like, oh, do you need help moving your prop? Like, can I help you do this? Like, there's more of a collaboration in theater, which I really don't see in film. And I feel like, especially with these small budget films that are going to come out of COVID, are going to be people wearing multiple hats, just really collaborating, working together to get through it and still create good content. So that's now with figuring out budgets, it makes it a lot easier because we were already in that mindset beforehand, and hopefully more people will now be jumping on board of this is how we create now.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the biggest challenge of being, do you see different challenges from working in New York than when you were working in Philadelphia, whether it be in theater or in film? Is it just a larger community for you? Are the challenges different? Is there any discernible difference for you, or is it just a bigger market?
I think indie world, you'll get more people who, like, once you make that group and that community, you'll have a bunch of yes-anders that are like, you want to make something, like, let's go, which I definitely miss that about the Philly community, especially with the theater world there. I thought everyone was very supportive, especially like from a small project to a big project. They didn't really care about how much you were getting paid. It was just kind of like, I'll show up. Like, what do you need me? Like, what can I do to help? New York is definitely more about work. It's like, how much can you, what's your budget? How much can you pay me? You're only paying me $50 and you're expecting me to work 12 hours? No. So it's figuring out that respect, which I do admire, because it is treating, being an actor, being a filmmaker as a career versus a hobby, which I like that hustle. And it makes me love New York for treating it as like, no, this is what I went to school for. This is my job. This is what I do for a living, versus like, oh, what do you really do? Yeah, you definitely see a difference though once you get on those bigger sets and you're just a number, or you're like, oh, well, go to your trailer, like, I'll see you at the end of the day, and you really don't get to meet anyone or talk to anyone and get that environment like you would on an indie or smaller set. So I personally, like, I love working in that smaller community just so I can know, who am I working with today? Like, and then from there, it has been, at least for me, it's like, I'll work with someone on a project, and then 3 months later, hey, Heather, we loved working with you. Come on back. Or like, oh, we think you'd be great for this. And that's just from working on those smaller sets that I had time to talk to people and get to know them, and become that family, which you get in theater.
Yeah. When you're scouting sets for New York, do you have to get permits and things, or are you mostly trying to stay? And how much of is that where a lot of your energy goes, or do you just try to keep it in places where you can be, that you're not going to have to get clearance for?
There's a really great website, almost like Airbnb, called peerspace.com for finding locations. I'm still very new to producing films, like still figuring out how to write call sheets and all the other jargon that, I didn't go to school for film, so I'm still figuring out the business. But peerspace.com for finding locations, like a theater or a bar. It's exactly like Airbnb, so it kind of allows you to get the permit that way. We have shot in a few parks, which getting the permit for that was very easy. But honestly, yeah, if I know someone's apartment, or I know my apartment, for example, we've used, I want to say 6 or 7 times for different shoots, and just set it up in different ways just because it's easy. But luckily now Steve has a little studio space out in Gowanus. You have some Sykes, you pull down your piece of paper, you have a little green screen. So for like smaller, like talking head or little commercial shoots, we've been able to shoot right out of that, which is lifesaver, game changer.
And then do you work on SAG contracts? Is there a special contract you can use for independent film that makes it a little bit more affordable, or how does that?
So I haven't crossed that boat exactly yet. I've had help on other projects where, like, the lead producer was taking care of that and was just on me just to be like, make sure the actors fill this out, get it to me end of day. So I'm still figuring out how to do that, especially like for our own sets. I know there's now it's a COVID-19 safety certificate that most sets are requiring now. So that's something like we're looking into. Once we start adding other people, other actors, that's something that I know we're going to have to deal with, especially it's like then a smaller set, you don't want to get sued if someone gets sick or if someone, God forbid, happens. So it's all just research, figuring out, working on other sets that hopefully can give you those answers. So yeah, I'm still navigating my way through all of that.
Yeah. Did you know you wanted to be a producer? Was that when you was Without Feathers Films around? Was that a Steve project? Did you guys put it together, both of you?
So Steve had his own company before he met me. It was called like Ocean Sky Films or something like that, because his last name's Ohocinski and no one could pronounce it. So he's like Ocean Sky, broke it up a little bit for people. I remember going into a Barnes and Nobles and seeing a Woody Allen book called Without Feathers and being like, I want this to be the name of my film company, being Heather Feather. People would always call me Heather Feather. So Without Feathers kind of came about because of that. So we formed it. I want to say we shot a short film called John Gets Ahead right before we moved to New York. And that was like our first Without Feathers film production. But yeah, the producer thing I kind of fell into. I want to say after being a choreographer in Philly for a little bit, just having a say in the production and helping create the final product, I really, really enjoyed that element. What I didn't like was sometimes I felt stuck. Like people would be like, no, you're too good of a choreographer. We wanted to audition you, but we need you as the choreographer. And that I wanted to wear two different hats. I wanted to be involved as much as I could, and I still like performing. So then I found out with film, it was like, okay, film people can wear multiple hats and not be so like niched into something. And then it was like project after project, and I kept finding that like none of the stuff I was in was getting released. And the impatient Sagittarius in me was like, what is going on? Like, where is my footage? Why haven't I, like, where is this in the world? So I was like, okay, like, what is the choreographer in film? How other than just being a choreographer, which I'm still trying to pursue as well. It's just not needed as much. Like that is definitely down the line. Like Steve and I have a dance film that we're trying to get off the ground eventually. But I was like, being a producer, you still have a say in the creative process and you still can voice your opinion and be heard a little bit more versus just being the puppet actor. So, yeah, I'm digging it. It's been exciting. It's been a journey. It's sometimes learning that I can't always act in everything, and that's okay. Especially Steve is like his reel is like all my face, and he's like, we need to start working with other people, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
So I want to back up for a second. When you said that you were getting the Sagittarius and you was getting frustrated because stuff wasn't getting released, does it mean you were working on films and they just weren't making it out into the viewing world?
Yeah, I've been in the business now, I want to say 10 years, and the only thing I think people have seen me in is the stuff I've made or like background work I've done. And they're like, oh, we saw you doing background on SNL. And I'm like, that's cool. I also can act. Like I have a really beautiful monologue in this film that you probably will never see. So that frustration I think was really starting to get to me, because it's like, I've had some really awesome, hilarious, great roles, and it's just like they just die on someone's computer, and that part is just really just makes my heart just like crumble, just because like theater, you get that, that good that you perform, you had a week-long performance and someone came to see your show and they liked it or they didn't like it, where film lives on a little bit forever, but then it's like if it never gets released, then it just dies. It's just the art is gone and no one will ever see it.
And so by working on Without Feathers, you felt like you could control more, where you would just have, like, you don't know, I guess, on one hand, if if it never gets out anywhere, you don't know what effort was put into getting that out there. So you felt it would.
Yeah, giving at least deadlines, giving at least, if it's my money going in to help put it to some festival, that at least someone eyes get on it, then knowing I have a little bit more control on the process, um, it feels a little rewarding, and at least I tried, versus I showed up, I said my line, I got my paycheck, I went home. Um, that is what's been really rewarding. Without Feathers also, I mean, Steve and I come from both a very, I guess, quirky, absurd viewpoint of the world and perspective. And for me, it was creating content that was, you know, family content. I feel like the work, a lot of it doesn't really care about the family anymore, of like sitting down as a family and watching it together. It's either like dumbed down for little kids, or it's too mature and just only focus on the adults. And it was coming down to, for me, character. It's like the films of the 90s, you had these awesome characters like Austin Powers, who people would want to dress up as for Halloween. The little kids really didn't understand what was going on, but there were some jokes that were funny and they could enjoy. And then there was other jokes for the adults, which they could enjoy. So work like that was not so, even like for female characters, not over sexualized, or just, I feel like a lot of times it's women trying to fit into the man's perspective, the male's perspective, and trying to be like a male, and just having these really awesome female characters. It's like, no, you don't have to get naked, like. And that's something, again, as a producer, being like, hey, actress showing up on my set, there's another woman there, I have your back. Yes, you're meeting us at a hotel, I'm there, what do you want to eat, don't worry, like, I have your back. And I feel like that for our company has just been creating the family environment. And because we will be a married couple in a month, it really is a mom and pop production company that we just want to bring you into our family and have you go through this journey with us.
Do you think that there is, I mean, I'm on a couple of, and I'm sure you are as well, the film producers out in LA, those threads, and it sounds like, it's an ongoing struggle in that community. Do you find it to be problematic in New York, or is it just that you want it to not be problematic for your company? Is it something that you have to worry about when you work on a film, when you work on another film? Is it just so ingrained in the industry that um, I was struck by you saying hey, there's going to be another woman there. I'm going to be there. You don't have to worry. And I just wonder if, or is it just we're so aware of it, that we just want to make sure other people can be reassured?
I mean, I've definitely been on situations that's like, "Ooh," and Steve's like, please share your location, please let me know what's going on, like, that you're safe. Because when you're, a woman, and you're going to some warehouse by yourself with a large bag of clothes in some strange part of New York, you know, and you've a lot of these people, you've maybe talked to them through email, you've never had a face-to-face, because no one's really doing in-person auditions anymore. So you're never really meeting the person on the other side of the camera. It's like, okay, I'm sending you a self-tape, but who are you? So that, I think, is a little scary, of like I make sure with all my actors, like, I reach out email, I give them my cell number, I tell them to text me, I tell them to call me, just so they know I'm a real person. um I there is still that element, and especially, with more of these bigger productions going smaller, there is that the risk again for these actors of, like, they're going to get paid less because people are going to be more hungry for work, and they're going to be put in these situations that, God forbid, they might get taken advantage of. So it's really important to have that guard up, and to be aware, and to do your research, and to not be afraid to call the person and be like, okay, what's really going on? And it might make the person sound, I guess, like, bossy or whatever. Like, I think taking care of yourself and knowing that, like, okay, this is a real job, and even if it's paying $100, like, you're okay. Like, this is a job. It's you. Someone's going to be there. I think that's really important.
How long has it been that it really is going to most self-submission, where you're just really not going in? And
Ah,
I guess a two-part question, because realize that's been happening during this time, but was that a thing that had been going on for a while prior to the pandemic? And also, do you is that a preferable way of doing it? I mean,
I
how do you feel about that?
I hate these self tapes. I hate them so much. I understand they're a part of, I guess, saving some money on a location to audition a few actors. Like, it's maybe a saving some time. You still have to go through everyone's submission anyway, but I feel like they're so cold. It's really been the last 2 years as self tape has become more of a thing. Especially, I think it's so bizarre that they ask actors to buy a camera, buy lighting setup, buy the blue sheet to go behind them. Where, like, I went to school for theater. I know how to do a monologue. Like, I don't know how to set up a camera. This is not what I went to school for, nor care about. If I would have gone to film school and become a filmmaker. Um, I I don't know. I've been trying to accept it more of, like, this is the new normal of, like, auditioning for work and getting people to see you. But I'm a big fan of the coffee shop audition, or just an in-person audition, sitting down with someone and being like, okay, this is me. Like, let's have a cup of coffee, like, and just feeling out the person. And especially if you're going to be on set with someone for 12 hours or in rehearsal with someone for 2 months, like, you really want people you can bond with and work with. um and the and I feel like most of my casting, at least, has been through me doing just like a small film gig here or there, even working background, and I'll be in holding with some of these people for 14 hours straight, and figuring out that way. I'm like, oh, that person is comedy too. Oh, and we share each other's reels, we tell each other's, like, horror stories, and then be like, okay, like, I like this person, I think I could work with them, they have a cool look to them. And that's kind of how I've, at least for Without Feathers film, we've been able to kind of make our little ensemble of actors we go out and reach out to, just from just getting to know them and seeing them who they are as people.
On set, so you guys are not doing like self-submissions?
We we have in the past, but to be honest, those people, like, working with them have been the strangest wackadoos. That, yeah, they fit the bill, we needed that certain look, but they were just terrible people to work with on set. Just, like, really hard to work with. Which is why, in people just I know or have met in person at least once, that I know, okay, they're chill, they're sane, they're not going to be difficult. They're the people I want to work with.
Hmm. Well, and even though film is individual takes or whatnot, as you say, you're spending so much time on the set, right? That in the same way that it can it can gather momentum in stage, I imagine that that could be tricky for you. Where do you think, Without Feathers, what do you see for its future? What do you hope and dream for it?
I would love, between Steve's storytelling and wanting to be a director, and my gusto for performing, but also just creating awesome content. I would love for us, to not have to worry about doing all these side hustles, and we can just concentrate on our work and making work, um, and that being our focus. Eventually, I know there's a few feature films we would love to crank out, one being this movie we shot a trailer for a while ago called Meth Crabs, horseshoe crabs on meth attacking Coney Island on the 4th of July hot dog eating contest. Um, just fun, entertaining work that people can laugh at and that true escapism that I feel like a lot of films, they've just so hunkered down into telling reality, versus like film's supposed to be an escape. It's supposed to make you not think about your job and how terrible it is. You're supposed to want to go into this fantasy world for an hour or two. So telling those stories, telling characters that will have a shelf life, versus like, oh, that was a good movie, and then you forget about it. So just creating like just work that people remember and can appreciate and love as much as we love making it.
Who are your favorite directors, film directors?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Or films that you have, you know, particularly talked about?
So my whole wedding has been modeled after Big Fish. And, I love Tim Burton. I do. I'm obsessed with Tim Burton. And especially the dreaminess of Big Fish. Our wedding, since he proposed at Coney Island, was supposed to be all carnival and dreamy, with Ferris wheels. So yeah, Tim Burton. I mean, I love Jim Henson. I think the Dark Crystal series that just came out was so amazing, of like the way they were storytelling with puppets, and you're just like, they created a world, and it was just art. It's art and storytelling, which is wonderful.
It's funny you talk about carnival. I want to get back to more of you, but I was going through photos the other day, and you were so wonderful in the IRC's production of Paradise Park, which is a Charles Mee play, and very much examining a lot of that strange sort of, it felt like a lot of Tim Burton aspects of that. But there's a wonderful photo of you with cotton candy in your hand, and you're dancing and dancing. And remember, you also did choreograph that final number at the end. That it took me back to a great time when that play seemed to be sort of the equivalent of what you're talking about on film. And I think there's something in all of us, right, that wants to be in that carnival place. But I interrupted you. You were searching too for directors.
Like Bob Fosse, like Sweet Charity. I just love like big wides that do all this storytelling, and then you can like push in your camera to get more of the little oddity things that are going on. And I think just that the Frug number and Sweet, like he just does such a great job. And it's something I've, trying to slowly transition from a choreographer into a choreographer for film. It's like, no, you need the wide, like get the wide, show their feet, show the bodies, where a lot of these DPs, they don't come from a theatrical world. So like they're trying to get the expressions on their face and everything that's going on. It's like, no one cares about that. Get their bodies, get their movement. Like Kubrick's really good. I don't know.
Do you have to push for, do you think, I don't know. I think movement it's a language all its own. And I do think in the films where we get more of that, there's so much more story in the film. And I think, getting back to Tim Burton, the composition of his characters within the very carefully constructed frames and sort of the visuals that he presents tell this multi-dimensional story, which is, do you think are you directing at all for film now? Do you think you will direct?
I directed one short horror thing. I'll send it over your way. It was called Casting Call, of like based off of, the experiences of lonely actress going to a warehouse hoping not to be killed. It's pretty much the premise of it. I did direct that. That was fun. And I showed it for the first time in a small female filmmaker festival, and it was just really exciting to get feedback in that sense of, I lived in the theater world for so long, and it's like, can I storytell in this medium? Well, do people like what I'm putting out? Which, I mean, with Connie too, it's like, you're putting yourself on the line, especially Connie is my improv, which is technically my writing. And it's like, do people find this funny? Is it a likable character? Super, super risky. And,
Hmm.
rewarding in a sense, even if there is a little bit of failure there. Um,
So
yeah.
how do you measure that? Let's go back to Connie for a second. How do you how what's your measurement tool for that? Is it just at the end of the day you feel like you've executed it based on this is the character I set out to do? Does it have anything to do with outside approval of it? Is it you and Steve sitting down trying to figure out how do you measure that?
Well, so great questions. So a lot of it is like, does Steve and I think this is funny? Great. And I know there's a few comedians out there that quote, it's like, well, like, at least if I think my work is funny, then so be it. Like, it's work I'm doing for myself. We usually, I mean, Facebook, this whole social media way of putting out content has been such an adventure to navigate because there's all these algorithms, and like if I post a video but I don't post it at the right time of day, like maybe only 5 people will see this video, and then you have to put $10 for 100 more people to see it. So we've kind of been navigating, I guess, like viewership on social media as well as on YouTube, and we have 60 subscribers, so hopefully out of this we'll
I
have a
know I
few more.
saw that.
But that's pretty good for we really have only been taking it really seriously the last 2 months and trying to build some subscribers. So yeah, once we start building momentum with that, that will be, at least we know, at least those people are watching it, and that's great. um Usually if I'll in individual text messages too, like when people are like, I saw that video, that was hilarious, like keep doing a good job, that for me is really rewarding as well, because at least I know family and friends that I care about, they're at least watching my stuff versus saying like, oh, you've been posting a lot recently, what's that all about, where I'm like, just watch it, like just see what's going on. um which is always hard to like keep reminding friends and family, like you have so many maybe friends on Facebook, and it's like, please watch my stuff, like please support me, like this is what I'm doing, I'm talking to a puppet in a basement, like come on, like watch my thing. Which is always, it's hard as it's the same as like a theater maker, and it's like, hey, I'm doing a show, come see my show, and people will make excuses left and right, where it's like, this is just one click, just 3 minutes of your life, please watch my video. And even that is really hard to try to force someone, unless it is me in person, which I have done, be like, here's my video, watch my video.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's hard forcing someone to take time out of their day to commit.
And yet, I think we're all looking for those places that we can go that are going to deliver that gold, right? The sort of laugh, the just I think that there are so many layers in this character that I have enjoyed it. And I don't think matter your age, because it's going to remind you of your aunt, your mother, your sister, the person next door, whoever that is. And you spoke before about families and family time, and what there's something very comforting about Connie, despite the fact that she's in a basement and got the pizza guy, all tied up there and everything. But I love that part of the plot development. I had to stay tuned to figure out like how the guy was going to get out of there. And I wonder, do you and Steve is it frequent that you watch an episode, or you watch? So let me back up a second. You do the 18 minutes, and you may have to do a couple of 18 minutes, and then you leave Steve to sort of decide how he's going to edit which sections, and you let him do that all on his own. You're really not. And then he calls you in if he's not sure about something, or do you guys disagree about a bit, or are you mostly on the same page about the content of it, what you think is funny?
We're mostly on the same page. Like even when we're shooting, like we'll leave notes, like on filming, like I'll say at the end of the take, it's like, oh, that was a really good take. So Steve will do his first, like, I'm not sure the actual like wording of it, but his first cut, I guess, is his like rough cut. Um, and he'll fine tune it a little bit, but not really care so much about like, logos or other stuff. He's like, this is kind of where I see it going. He'll have me watch that through. I'll give him notes of like, oh, I don't really think that was funny, or it's like, it's getting really wordy here, like we don't really need that, or as I know, as for Steve as an editor, he's been having a lot of fun making like editing jokes of like cutting Connie mid like sentence off, or like still playing with the idea of that Connie doesn't really know how to control a camera. She's still new to social media, like doesn't really know. Because a struggle we were having is like, because people didn't really, they thought Connie was real. We're like, do we put Crafting with Connie by Heather, like starring Heather Cole? Like we were really fighting with this because we're like, we're trying to make her like an internet character versus like a character I'm playing. So right now, I guess the argument that where we've ended up with is we're not going to include starring Heather Cole, and we're just going to leave her as is. And, you know, hopefully once people subscribe, they'll see it's like, oh, it's a show. Okay, I get it. Like, oh, she's okay. Like something's a little off here. Like this is a comedian. It's not really taking itself seriously. I did have my first hate comment. I had a hater, which was like someone being like, I forget the exact wording, but she was like, you're using your platform all wrong, or like something like just totally like I hate your voice. I hate like the way you're like, but directing it towards Connie, and the way her wording was, it was, she didn't even get it. She didn't even understand. And that was just watching like the one episode versus like, okay, if you watch a few of these, you kind of understand. It's like, okay, it's a character.
Did she think Connie was a real person, and that's really, these are the crafts that she's turning out? So in effect, so she was giving her a hard time for her voice, thinking it was really Connie.
Right. And that's where this discussion came about, because we're like, we're seeing more of this develop over time, and it's like, do we have to include that it is, at least in the beginning or the end, that it's starring me and that we have a crew behind it or whatever. But right now we're going to just leave it as is and hopefully keep going with that.
I do think it rides this really interesting line, which I find fun, where we don't, I mean, the crafts are just good enough for the most part that like there's, you know, legitimacy in them. You know, you can take tea bags and stick them in glue and then dump glitter on them and hang them on a tree, and it actually, you know, can really work. And I think that's the complexity of that is what's very interesting about what you're doing. Well, it's 6 o'clock, and I bet you want to get to your dinner too, Heather. So thank you. It was delightful to catch up with you and find out more about your projects. And I look forward to seeing more from Connie and the Civil War and all the things that you have on store for us. And I appreciate you taking the time to come today to Into the Absurd and give us your little slice of the world, your big slice of the world, as it will. I look forward to seeing more from you. And for everybody else, tune in next week. Liz Goldberg Johnson will be here, and she is an artist in New York and a very interesting person doing a lot of work in film and fine arts. And I'm sure you're going to want to hear everything Liz has going on. So that'll be next week at 5 o'clock here on Zoom. And until then, have a great week, everybody.